we go.
Welcome, everybody, to Radicalized Truth Survives. I'm Heidi Cuda. I'm here with Jim Stewartson, High Fidelity, Sean Connor, some of the bravest folks I know fighting the bullies, doing the hard work of fighting the bullies during a terrible disinformation war. We are so happy that everyone is joining us. We're only days away from our wonderful Patreon party that we're going to have for all of our supporters. Thank you very much once again for supporting this show. When I say we're the most dangerous show in America, I'm not really kidding, because there's no hedge funds. There's nobody who is secretly funding us. We are 4 people who do this every week because we think it's civic duty. It's clearly getting more serious. And without further ado, let's jump into Frontloaded.
Yes, sir. Here we go.
Frontloaded.
So just a couple quick items of business. We're going to be talking about the assault on women that's happening right now, state by state. And of course, you all have probably been reading about the Supreme Court quote unquote leak. So we're going to be talking about that with our guests and my writing partner, my investigative reporting partner, Sian Norris, who is joining us all the way from the UK, staying up very late for us to bring us the news. There's so much good stuff that we're going to be discussing, and there's a lot to be really hopeful about. There appears to be a backlash in the UK against the Conservative Party, who have lost tons and tons, hundreds of seats across the country. She'll be telling us about that. Why it's important is that I have a little bit of intel that I've been talking to the gentleman about, that there seems to be a backlash even in America against those considered elite from the right. And that's very important. And we're going to be having a good time with that theme as we look for pre-buttals, as we look for ways to get ahead of the narratives and start to crush some of these extremist right-wingers by beating them to their own narrative game and their narrative war. So I'm excited to talk a little bit about that. And speaking of extreme right-wingers, a very important Twitter thread showed up in my DMs by somebody named Fred Wellman. And he says that we need to cover things like Peter Thiel's power grab in terms of how you would cover a horse race or business. Instead of saying that J.D. Vance, advances in Ohio, the framework needs to be billionaire investor Peter Thiel completed a key first step in his purchase of American democracy with the acceptance by the Ohio GOP of his $10 million bid for the Republican Senate seat there. I think that's a very important framework, and I'm sure Hi-Fi and Jim and or Sean have a thought on that.
I think Fred should come on and tell us all about it. That's what I think.
Yeah. I think that's a great idea.
He's exactly right, of course. It's hard to cover, such a big, thing, right? It's so complicated. There's so many different people involved and so many different ways of kind of presenting the harm that they're doing.
That's right.
And I think Fred has great perspective, and I'd love to hear it directly.
I absolutely love that. I'm going to say it one more time because it gives me great joy. Billionaire investor Peter Thiel completed a key first step in his purchase of American democracy. That's the kind of narrative framing I want to see as we move forward toward the midterms. Hi-Fi.
Okay, so I am an Ohio boy. Born and raised, basically. Been here forever. First off, fuck Peter Thiel. All right. Second, you want to talk about elitism? You've got J.D. Vance, who's this Yale-educated lawyer boy from Silicon Valley coming back to my state, this elitist.
Person.
Yes, person. It started with a P, but that was not the word I was going to use. But this elitist comes back to Ohio. He doesn't care about Ohioans. He doesn't. He's saying we need a border in Texas. How does a border wall in Texas help anybody in Ohio? Right? The guy's a moron.
Trump tried to endorse him, but called him JP Mandel.
I know.
They don't even know who they're. Yeah.
And
I
then
mean,
some
okay,
guy
It
immediately on
because
Twitter
it doesn't
started
matter.
laughing.
It's whoever Peter's guy is. Like,
Yeah.
that's
like
and that's
we gotta
why.
we gotta fucking realize how powerful and subversive this fucker is. Like,
Yeah.
he has paid for a great deal of harm in America. He's
Yeah.
largely behind cryptocurrency, which is fucking everybody up.
Right.
NFTs are crashing, and everybody's like, "What happened to my fungible?" Like, no shit, it's crashing. It's designed to. It's
Yeah.
designed all of it to cause chaos, and everybody needs to understand that Peter Thiel is not a fucking investor. He is a terrorist. He is an anarchist who is trying to destroy our fucking world because he thinks he can run it better than anybody else.
He's
And you
trying
want to
Him
talk
and his
about
buddy Elon
misogyny?
Musk.
You want to talk about fucking misogyny? Peter Thiel wrote an essay where he said women shouldn't have the right to vote.
Yeah.
He
What kind
did.
of bullshit is that?
That was the same paper where he said that freedom
Those
and
are-
democracy are no longer compatible.
Yeah.
Right?
And think about
These
$10
aren't new
million
views, guys. Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, they're not new views.
No, I'm
but-
saying
but-
these aren't new views espoused by these people, and people, like we've talked about over and over in the show. You have to, when they say something, you've got to listen to what they say. People interpret for these guys. People interpret for each other constantly all the time. They just take a moment and just literally what they say is what they believe. There's no two ways about
That's
it.
right.
I mean, to think differently is just to buy into that confusion. Listen to what they say.
But
They
then
mean
they
what they say.
apologize.
No. They
No.
mean
That's
what
a
they
very
say.
important point. What did we learn from Paul Mason? When a fascist tells you who they are, believe them. And I'm
Believe
just going to.
anybody.
People are afraid to use
Same
that
thing
word.
about me. Same thing about you guys. When we tell you
Yeah.
who we are, that's who we are.
That's right.
Yeah, when
I'm a
Putin
dork.
says he's going to invade Ukraine, he's going to do
He's
it.
gonna fucking invade. I mean,
And
it's
when-
not shock.
And when he and frankly, when he says he's going to use nukes, he's going to fucking do it.
You have to listen to it.
You have to actually listen to what he fucking says, because these are not us. They're not normal people with boundaries, right? They don't
I'm
have
gonna-
boundaries. They think that that boundaries don't apply to them, and
Right.
it turns out they're fucking right.
Right. So isn't
The
Peter
government's
Thiel,
given him billions of dollars since he said that.
isn't Peter Thiel the one who believes that capitalism and democracy is not compatible, or do I have that wrong?
No, that's
Capitalism
what I
and
said.
freedom.
And he said freedom and democracy are.
Freedom and
He said
And freedom,
specifically, I know this quote. Most importantly, I no longer believe freedom and democracy are compatible. Most importantly, in the first paragraph of his fucking manifesto in 2009.
okay,
Let's
so
get it straight.
why this is important is because, first of all, we learned from Nancy McLean that much of what we're seeing is this fear that democracy may get in the way of capitalism, right? So I think this goes back to what Sean was saying. Believe them when they tell you who they are. And I also think that spending $10 million on somebody like JD Vance is probably me spending like $10 on two, cafe lattes or something. It probably feels like nothing. So anyway, I think Fred, come on the show. This was a very robust start to what's going to be an amazing show. So let's go ahead and move on to word phrase of the week. Thank you, gentlemen.
All right. Word phrase of the week this week is obscurantism.
Ooh.
That's a good word, right?
Ooh.
Obscurantism, the presentation of ideas that are meant to conceal truth, the practice of deliberately preventing the facts or full details of something from becoming known.
Yes.
Actually, can I give an example real fast?
Yeah.
Sure.
Chuck Johnson saying he is not a white supremacist.
Yep.
That's obscurantism.
Look at you.
Well, that's
Hi-Fi's just so proud.
I
of
mean,
you
that's just a
right now.
lie.
Here's the other one.
Well, okay, yeah. It's lying. It's doublespeak. It's bullshit. It's hiding stuff.
Here's an example that may or may not come up in our interview, which is partial birth abortion, right?
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Is intentionally obscuring the reality, which is that there is no such thing as partial birth abortion, but the term gets used enough over and over again that people start to
It gets stuck in the head.
believe it, and
Yeah.
it becomes part of their moral.
And they think it's a birth of a child. They think it's
That's
an
right.
abortion of a birth, and it's not.
Just like nobody's brainwashing kindergartners in Florida to, become gay. Just like CRT is not being taught in elementary schools. It's the
Yes.
same exact concept. Thank you for that, Hi-Fi. Any other thoughts before moving on to why it matters? Let's do it.
All right, here it goes, guys. Right here.
Why does it matter? Why does it matter? Why high fidelity?
So dope.
Yeah, it is. All right. First story of the week this week is Facebook Flex. What is that story about, you may ask? Well, let me tell you. That story is about a whistleblower just recently released information that when the Australian government was debating laws that would affect Facebook and would curtail some of its ability to do what Facebook does, Facebook made it difficult for people to reach the Facebook pages of the Australian government, and even went so far as to block traffic to some of the Facebook pages of the Australian government. The outcome of this is that when when the Australian government did pass the laws against Facebook, they were massively watered down. Why does this matter? Since when is it okay for a corporation to extort a government?
Well, yeah, it's unfortunately it's the first time I think that we've seen them get caught. But corporations and Facebook have had a pretty dastardly past in history. Some of the discovery documents I've read between healthcare companies and Facebook would actively lead individuals away from symptoms or away from products that they do that the individual had that had caused them harm. But this is a government, so a different matter. But yeah, they've been leading people in directions for information for quite some time, or withholding information in access. So I'm glad that this is finally coming out.
And I would like to remind everyone that when this was occurring, Peter fucking Thiel was sitting on the board of Meta / Facebook. Just wanted to throw that in there for no reason. And
So I mean that is the governmental version, right? But Twitter, as we know from firsthand experience, is perfectly comfortable with censoring people and allowing harm and participating in harm in some cases, just like Facebook, and it's only going to get worse.
Well,
sadly.
It's interesting because I think this falls under the category of techno-fascism. I do know when Hi-Fi and I watched the film Alphaville, which really predicted a lot of what we're living through right now, it didn't even occur to me, I don't know why, until watching it the second time, that the lead character, who's basically a journalist kind of turned sort of ass-kicking spy, his name was Lemmy, like Lemmy from Motorhead, Lemmy Caution. And I feel
Nice.
like, this was Godard in the 60s saying, let me caution you, whoever probably actually wrote the original book saying it, and then it was adopted into a film. But how important is it that we are living under this type of techno-fascism? I don't know what else to call it. It's unsafe at any speed. And thank God regulations are starting to become a bigger part of the dialogue.
Absolutely. And I don't think people talk about enough just how many white supremacists, incel, beta sons of bitches there are in Silicon Valley, in software development, in AI development.
Engineering,
Engineering.
Wow.
Tech bros got issues,
as
bro.
CEOs, I mean.
And CEOs, yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
So
and recruitment
that's going to be
and
the
all of it.
theme for this show.
I mean,
Mark
Mark Zuckerberg was building Hot or Not. That's what he was building, if you
exactly.
recall.
Face Smash, yeah, Hot or Not.
Yeah.
No, but tech bros have issues. I like that. I like that as a theme. This is going to be a good theme that should carry us through this episode. Thank you for that. I think we have, we're moving on to something about kids. We need to talk about droga.
Kids, we need to talk about drugs. And hopefully your parents have had this conversation with you. And if they haven't, well, I'm going to have a little conversation with you right now. Because
Uncle Hi-Fi.
Uncle Hi-Fi is going to lay it down. 500 kilograms of cocaine were found at a Nespresso factory in Sweden. That's a lot. That's a lot. But the other things you need to keep in mind is just in the last couple of weeks, the former president of Honduras is being extradited to the United States. Why? For cocaine trafficking. In Colombia, the former head of the Gulf cartel is now being extradited to the United States. Why? For cocaine trafficking. The British Virgin Islands premier was recently released on bail in Miami, where he had been extradited. Why? Cocaine trafficking. And Venezuela, who has not normally been a cocaine producer, just had their first massive lab raid. And part of the problem here is we've got people like Elon fucking Musk, who is a problem, normalizing the usage of cocaine.
Yeah.
This
On
is
Twitter.
not good. On Twitter.
On
This
Twitter.
is, look, I'm a bit older. I'm a bit more experienced when it comes to chemical usage. Some people can maintain, some people cannot. But if we continue down the road of prohibition, all we are going to do is we're going to lead to more corruption, more violence, more death. We need to sit down as a country, as a world, and have a serious conversation about how we're going to deal with our drug problem.
Yeah, and a serious conversation is not fucking suggesting that you're gonna buy Coca-Cola and put the fucking cocaine back in. This weaponized irony bullshit needs to fucking end. What Elon Musk is doing over and over again is just like scraping at the foundations of sanity. Right? He's telling people cocaine is great. He's telling people speaking of Peter fucking Thiel, he's telling everybody that they should do psychedelics instead of take the prescribed antidepressant medications that they take. Fuck
that directly puts people at fucking risk.
So wait
That
a
is
second.
unacceptable.
Serious risk.
You just said Teal. Now, wasn't that Musk who did that?
Musk said it. Thiel is the one who's investing a shitload of money
That's
into
right.
psilocybins.
In tandem. PayPal
So
monster.
Peter Thiel has $1 billion or multiple $1 billion in multiple psychedelics startups.
Yeah,
This is all about money.
Like I've done plenty of psychedelics. I've had good experiences and a lot of bad experiences.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with your fucking depression.
Yeah.
That's being that a doctor is talking to you about, and a therapist and fucking professionals, not some frat boy who's trying to turn Twitter into his personal weapon.
Yeah. And
That's
I mean, there's a bunch of studies coming out. Obviously, there are under clinical guidance certain antidepressant treatments used with psilocybin psychedelics. That's certainly true. But for Musk to put this out without the caveat, easily he could have said, why couldn't he have said, and think about this, the difference between this. Talk to your doctor about psychedelics for depression.
Because he don't care.
Right? That's great. I know.
People.
So why edit that? What's the purpose in purposefully taking out just a very easy thing to have put in there, right? I mean,
because he's radicalizing people. Because he's trying to make people crazy. He actually, this is something that happens in a lot of fascist takeovers. Drugs are used in a lot of these circumstances. Speed was used all over the Nazis, by the Nazis in a lot of cult settings. Jim Jones. There was all kinds of crazy ass drugs going on to scramble people's minds so that they can be controlled.
Right. Yes.
And actually, I would like to bring up that was actually one of the themes of the Process Church back in the 60s and 70s was take acid and join a cult.
Right.
They like people with their brains scrambled.
That's
and where they ended up? In the fucking Manson family.
I was going to say that old pimp Charles Manson didn't do the drugs himself. He just made sure he gave them to his followers. So we know how that story ended. Okay, well, that was very sobering, but also very important. And in case you didn't know what Jim was referencing, Elon Musk tweets out, maybe I'll buy Coca-Cola and put the cocaine back in it. And then he tweets out what he was referencing, again, using this gigantic platform to tweet out an agenda. And as the boys or gentlemen here have just unmasked, possibly there's some profiting motivations going on in that as well. So that's very unnerving. Again, when you talk about influence, being under the influence, you talk about cults. It's like the tech bros have issues. I love that theme. And then they're spreading their issues to their followers, which is very unnerving.
Can you cancel my subscription, Heidi? I got too many issues already.
You're practically perfect today, Connor.
Yeah, right. All right.
I got to put that in.
Perfect in every way.
Moving on.
Moving on.
Let's go.
Moving on. All right. Last story of the week this week is the pain in Spain has become pretty plain. And what is that about? Well, a couple weeks ago, the Catalan separatist movement in Spain found out a bunch of their politicians had been hacked with Pegasus spyware on their phones. And yeah, this was a big no-no and it was bad and everybody was really pissed off. Then it comes out that the Prime Minister of Spain has had his phone hacked with NSO Group's Pegasus spyware. And of course, a couple of days after that, the head of intelligence for Spain said, "Oh yeah, we hacked phones, but we did it legally. We did it legally." I wonder if they hacked the Prime Minister's phone. But the reason this is important, one, look, we have a spyware pandemic going around. This is the same spyware that was used to kill Jamal Khashoggi.
Yeah,
Jamal Khashoggi. This is spyware that was used against his family. This is spyware that was found when Denmark was spying on Germany.
yeah.
It's got to stop. And I don't know if we need treaties, armistice. I don't know. But something has to be done about this. And the second reason this matters is because everyone needs to remember that Michael fucking Flynn and Q Cyber Technologies did business with NSO Group.
Yes, and NSO Group is deeply connected to Israeli intelligence, especially Unit 8200, which is famously an operation that goes out to harm people for the right wing.
Catherine Woods, Peter Thiel's and Elon Musk's favorite investor, has the Israeli technology funding group, where they sneak in and buy all the tech from Israel super cheap. They invest in it, so they have first shot at any of that between her investment circles.
I think it's time. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. Speaking of abuse of technology and spyware and shit like that, and abuse of data, a Peter Thiel funded company, I believe called SafeGraph, was just hit with selling location data of women who went to Planned Parenthood and abortion clinics.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's time to give some Bob Fosse jazz hands to hi-fi right now for that incredible Why It Matters. And now I think we need to move on to brief legal briefs.
Okay, it's my turn.
Brief legal briefs.
Hey. So here is a brief, unfortunately, probably going to be a brief class action, but it's a attempt at shareholders to slow down at least the purchase of Twitter. What I didn't know about this when it first came out was it's a class action, and it's initiated by the Orlando Police Pension Fund. So it's through a pension fund seeking to form a class. As you can see here, to slow down the merger between, the takeover of Twitter from Musk. Additionally, the additional defendants are Jack Dorsey is also a defendant in the
Interesting.
suit. Yep.
Uh-huh.
So it's seeking to declare that Twitter breached their fiduciary responsibilities, and they're attempting to recoup legal fees. A typical class action, but it seeks to slow down that process at least, and hopefully, that will happen, and we'll get a chance to find out more.
This was a conspiracy between the two of them. They're open about it, and the fucking shareholders have every right to be like, wait, what are we doing here? Hold on, of course.
Yeah. And so one of the initial terms in the suit is to slow down the takeover and to have it not be executed before 2025. So it would seek to really slow down this process, which is kind of, I think, would be a valuable would be a win.
And before we
although Elon Musk controls it, and I'm going to talk already controls
I was
it.
going
I'm
to
gonna
say,
talk
before
about
we
that
jump
more.
into Jim's assessment and jump into Jim's hellscape, I do want you to give us a quick update on the news you've been following related to Marjorie Taylor Greene. Although she's been banned from this show, we definitely need to do a
I think my moratorium on her is more creating any content for her, even if it's against her. But unfortunately, the lawsuit to keep her off the ballot did not go through. It did not get approved. It was turned down. It was rejected.
Insurrectionists can be on the ballot in this country.
That's and the good thing, I did hear an interview with the free speech org CEO, I guess you would say, and he had a good point in that in the judge's ruling, he actually affirmed a lot of the points and positions that they were affirming. So by rejecting the suit, he affirmed the fact that yes, this process is viable. Because that was not even tested. We've never tested this process.
Okay.
So in his ruling, that now has become a viable standard of test for whether or not someone can be on the ballot. So small recompense, but
how is a woman who is exposed for the entire hearing for fucking being an insurrectionist and forgets everything that ever happened to her ever?
Yeah.
How the fuck does that end up in what would have been the circumstances where it wouldn't have been?
We have holes in our laws, and our freedoms are continually weaponized against us, and that
I just don't even know what the success conditions are because it was so fucked up and so obvious.
I think one of the things that I imagine will happen.
She confessed 100 times. I mean,
one of the things that I imagine now will happen is that just like Georgia will probably remove that constitutional law out of the tax law judge's purview and put it into a more applicable judge's area to rule. He was not qualified to rule on these things. But that's how,
But he did have a very lovely antique, pottery collection.
Oh, his Japanese pottery collection was fun.
Before Hi-Fi has the final word on this, I do want to say, when I say that Greene has been banned from the show, what I'm saying is that we are not going to be continually distracted by horrible trolls. Hi-Fi.
Yeah, that's right.
I just have 3 words on Marjorie Taylor Greene. Fuck that dude. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
I'm gonna move this week.
That was bad. But again, as Jim always says, we didn't bring Hi-Fi in the show because it was safe to do so.
No,
we brought him on the show because he's one hell of a news producer and a wonderful, wonderful friend. All right, so we got some Hellscape. Thank you very much, Connor, for those updates.
You got it.
Hellscaping.
Jim Stewartson's Hellscape. Oh, fuck.
Oh, fuck. Oh, fuck.
Oh, fuck. So, we're not going to deviate from the theme in Hellscape this week. I want to talk a little bit about the root of so much of this, if not all of it, which is misogyny, right?
Yeah.
Here's the thing, racism, all the isms, all the hate, right? Most of that is just based on nonsense, right? As science tells us, race is barely even actually a thing that exists at all, right? The boundaries between them are basically meaningless. But there is a difference between men and women, right? There is a fundamental difference. And the difference has allowed men to take advantage of certain things over the years in ways that our society has decided are fucking immoral, right? Like preventing women from voting, being represented by their government, having women, be able to hold office or run a company, or be paid the same fucking thing that men do, or control their fucking bodies. And right now, this ancient grievance, the most ancient grievance of all, is really rearing its head. Not just in the impending destruction of women's autonomy by the fascist cult members who control the Supreme Court right now, right? But by people like fucking Elon Musk, who in the last few weeks since he's taken over Twitter, and he has, make no mistake about it, Twitter is now his personal weapon. He's been executing every possible lever. He's been pushing every button he can find to increase misogyny, to increase radicalization. I've just been seeing it over and over. The temperature is rising. And what has been the main focus on Twitter for the last 2 weeks? Amber Heard.
Yep.
Amber Heard, right? Who is no angel, clearly. Like, Amber Heard, I heard her say some horrible shit. But she's a fucking abuse victim. A domestic abuse victim. And for the last 2 weeks, hundreds of millions of people have been exposed to Amber Heard is a psychopath. Amber Heard is this, trending all fucking day long on Twitter. With the live feed to the trial broadcast at the top, pinned to the top. That is a decision. That is a decision by Twitter.
Yeah.
Let's be clear. Let's talk about another decision that Twitter made under Elon Musk's new rule, which is there has been one story about Roe v. Wade pinned to trends for a fucking week, and it's that the Supreme Court is investigating the leak. It's literally pinned there. Again, this is Twitter intentionally obscuring the horror that half the people in the country are experiencing directly, and the same part of the other half is also feeling, which is that fundamental physical human bodily rights are being taken away from women. And what Twitter has to say about it is that there was a leak in the Supreme Court. That is intentional. Sean, do you have that tweet? So the Saudis had managed to get a whole bunch of Twitter stock by doing separate deals with people, and they initially opposed the deal with Elon Musk. But suddenly, a couple of weeks later, Al-Walid Talal, who's a member of the House of Saud, the royal family, says, I believe you will be an excellent leader for Twitter. This is a guy who lives in a country where women can't drive, right? One of the most oppressive, misogynistic societies on planet Earth, right? And here's Elon Musk overtly running Twitter right now, taking billions of dollars from this guy and having a good old time. These fucking billionaires. Listen, Elon Musk has $300 billion. Al-Walid Talal has God knows how many billions of dollars. No one knows. Here's the thing. In 2017, a year before he was murdered, Al-Walid Talal tried to lure Jamal Khashoggi back to the United States. A few days after he failed in that mission, he was taken hostage by the regime, by the Saudi regime, and shaken down for billions of dollars to make sure that he stayed in line. They shook him down. If anybody remembers that, they did it at Four Seasons.
I do remember that.
There was a bunch of billionaires. This fucking guy was one of them. And the reason why those guys were treated that way was to put them in their place by the most oppressive regime you can imagine, especially against women.
Can I just? Oh,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I got to point something out here. Everybody says how Elon is such a smart guy and he's so. What are the kingdom's views on journalistic freedom of speech? Hey, you fucking idiot! They killed journalists. You should know this already.
Yes, then that's the next part, right?
That's part of it. Yeah, I think that's part of his high-fi. Yeah,
is he wants to is this guy was trying to murder a journalist in order to push the he was trying to bring him to I don't know if Al-Walid Talal was trying to murder him, but what I know is he was trying to lure him back to Saudi Arabia. Then fucking Wikipedia, you can look it up. So why are these billionaires, these misogynists, this guy Al-Walid who works for the royal family of a regime that is brutal and murdered Khashoggi? Why are these people deciding who gets to talk and what they get to say, and what they do with their bodies, right? Mm-hmm. They're making political decisions.
Yeah.
So one of the consequences of misogyny that isn't corrected by parents is they become bullies, right? Yeah. They not only bully women, which they do, they bully everyone. It becomes a pattern where they believe that they can impose their will onto others, and that is okay. It is sociopathic behavior, and it is both for some people in part of just who they happen to be, and some of it is trained, right? People are trained to have these beliefs. One of those people was the next graphic, please, Mr. Sean.
Which one's the next one?
Eric Prince.
Okay, gotcha.
Sorry.
Yeah. Bad news.
Eric Prince has no conscience whatsoever, and he is a bully, right? Here's how much of a bully he was. This story is about Eric Prince and his oligarchs going into the Ukrainian government in the year 2020 to try and privatize the Ukrainian army, take over the manufacturing. They wanted to sell arms to Russia. That was their big plan. Artemchenko and Derkach were going to fund the privatization of Ukraine, their military, right in advance of, guess what? The invasion of Ukraine by Vladimir Putin.
Yeah.
This in that story, like there's a lot of quotes from people who are familiar with Eric Prince's thinking. That story was put out there in terms of prebuttals, Heidi, by Eric Prince because he knew how fucked up that was, and so he wanted to get it out as soon as possible before he knew what was going to happen, which is Putin invading Ukraine.
Yeah.
He literally went in there and he was bribing people. He was bullying these people. Like in the story, you can just hear these conversations. One of the guys that they sent in there was Joseph Schmitz. Joseph Schmitz, like Eric Prince, is a Knight of Malta and helped Eric Prince kill a whole bunch of Muslims in Blackwater. Joseph Schmitz was also in the government for a brief time, which is terrifying. So, look, Eric Prince, like a lot of these guys, like Elon Musk, like Mike Flynn, like Donald Trump, they're bullies, right? They were allowed to be bullies as kids, and they grew up to do it to the world. And we, all of us, have to stand up to them.
That's right.
To look in their face and say, not today. You're not getting my fucking lunch money today. That's not going to happen. Right? There's a certain point where people have to understand that it's almost that simple.
Yeah.
You've just got a bunch of bullies who are trying to impose their will on you. Don't let them.
And as a woman hearing that, I'm thinking about how I knew 2016 when I knew Trump was going to win, that we were going to be in for a lot of pain and a lot of bullying. And I was not wrong about that. And if you have not read Jim's latest very personal post, I encourage you to do so, because he came and he exposed the fact that he was bullied as a child. And I think that many of us are fighting this fight because we don't like bullies. And this is the perfect segue to lead us into Sian Norris, coming to us from the UK, coming to us from the Byline Times. And also, Sian and I have been fighting bullies together for now almost a couple of years. So let's bring her in. Oh, it's so great to see Sian Norris. We're so happy to have you back. We've been handpicking some of our favorite folks from the early days a few months ago to come back, because there's just been so many important stories that we've been working on and we've been breaking collectively, as well as the work that you and I have been doing. And for those who don't know, Sian and I actually met over the editing of the piece that I did with Jim, where we basically did our big QAnon piece, and her brilliance came through, and I'm so blessed to have met her and to be able to call her a writing partner. And really what that means is that I wake up and the bulk of the work is done, and I get to go grab the bites from the interviews, the experts in the field from all over it. And I feel very grateful to have you as just a brilliant partner.
Well, I'm grateful too. It's always amazing to work with you. And I think some of the stories that we've worked on together are some of the, just talking about so many important issues and really digging deep into the roots of these issues. And yeah, it's always a joy to collaborate.
One of my favorite things is when we're actually in the document at the same time, and I get to see, that's so much fun. So let's get right into it, because these interviews always go so incredibly fast. There's some major breaking news happening out of the UK. There are some unprecedented things happening politically. Can you give our viewers an update?
Okay, so on Thursday, we had local elections in lots and lots of constituencies or councils across the UK. And everybody was expecting that it was going to go pretty poorly for the Conservative Party. There was a sense after Partygate, when it came out that people in Downing Street were having gatherings and drinks during the lockdowns, and the cost of living crisis, where people with really living in poverty are seeing their bills go up. We're all seeing our bills go up, but obviously it's definitely impacting those with the least the most. So we knew it was going to be a bad night for the Conservatives when people go and vote for their local council representatives, but it was shockingly bad, and it looks like the Conservatives have lost just under 500 council seats.
Wonderful.
So this means that I think the Daily Mail, which is one of the right-leaning newspapers that we have, said it would be bad, or like I think they even used the word disastrous if they lost 350. We're past that, so this is a bad kind of result. Labour made some gains, the Liberal Democrats made a lot of gains, the Green Party made gains. But really interestingly, alongside the local council elections, Northern Ireland was having an election for its executive, so for who was representing the Northern Ireland constituencies at Stormont, which is the kind of parliament within Northern Ireland. And ever since Northern Ireland ever since 1920s, when Northern Ireland was created effectively, and the Republic of Ireland went independent, it's always had a unionist leadership. And for the first time in 101 years, the nationalist party Sinn Féin is now the biggest party in Northern Ireland. So this, combined with the continued resurgence of the Scottish National Party in Scotland, which wants independence for Scotland, Sinn Féin has always been advocating for a united Ireland, so for Northern Ireland to become part of the Republic, as opposed to the unionist parties, which believe Northern Ireland should be part of the UK. We could be seeing the breakup of the UK. I mean, this is
Wow.
happening. So it's a kind of seismic shift in Northern Irish politics, what's just happened today.
This is
How much of a role did Brexit play in Sinn Féin getting the vote in Northern Ireland, do you think?
So Northern Ireland voted to remain in the 2016 referendum, but the ruling party, the DUP, the Democratic Unionist Party, was very pro-Brexit. So there was this kind of, mismatch between the biggest party in the country, in the province, and the way that the vote had gone in with Brexit. There's a lot of discussion whether this has been about the Northern Ireland Protocol, whether it's about the kind of political tensions between the Sinn Féin and the DUP. There's all sorts of different reasons, but I think we have to kind of consider Brexit as quite a big reason. The changes that have happened in Northern Ireland since Brexit, where we've got a customs border in the Irish Sea for the first time. I mean, these have been big deals, and there was very little conversation during the 2016 referendum about the impact on Northern Ireland, which was really concerning, because that really is the front line of Brexit in so many ways. And it's only 24 years since the Good Friday Agreement was signed. Before that, we had decades of violence in Northern Ireland. We've seen increasing violence in Northern Ireland since the Brexit referendum, including the horrific murder of a journalist a couple of years ago. So, it's been a real focal point for lots and lots of change around, and lots of rows around Brexit. And it feels like perhaps this election is showing some of those rows come home to roost.
So a bunch of things are going through my mind as we're talking right now. One of them is that what we're doing here at RadPod is we're actually building a network. I mean, this is incredible that we get this kind of breaking news from boots on the ground reporters, best reporters in the world. And I'm just blown away at how we're able to inform our viewers. The other thing that I want to talk to you about, let's go back to the 500 conservative losses. Do you think that is a backlash to a bit of elitism, or just let's talk about Partygate and the rules only apply to you little people, the great unwashed, they don't apply to us? What do you think was going on there?
Yeah, so it's just under 500. But yeah, absolutely. I think Partygate is really fueling this backlash against the Conservative Party. I mean, in 2019, we had a December election and the Conservatives won a huge majority, an 80-seat majority in the Houses of Parliament. And everybody just thought like, well, this is it. Boris is untouchable. It seemed like scandal after scandal would happen. Nothing seemed to touch him. We were always being told that the scandals are priced into Boris. We just expect sort of bad things to be floating around him, but that's who he is. And we should all just, get on with it because that's what people like about him. I think Partygate really changed that. This was a time when people couldn't go to their loved ones' funerals. This was a time when people couldn't hold their loved ones' hands when they were dying. Everybody has a story of something that they missed, something that was heartbreaking, something that was painful, even just, being on your own for a long period of time, or not seeing your family, not seeing loved ones. Everybody had something that was taken away from them by the lockdowns. And then to find out that in Downing Street, there was this culture of partying, of drinking, of, you know, the day before Prince Philip's funeral, there was allegedly a party where people got so drunk, you know, that they were like having a leaving do in Downing Street. And you just have this sense of like, well, we didn't do that. We stayed home. We shut ourselves away. We didn't see the people we loved. We didn't have birthday parties. We didn't have leaving do's. We did the right thing. And I think in the UK, there is this kind of rightly or wrongly sense that, you know, we do the right thing and we follow the rules. And the idea that there was this culture of impunity from the very top. And then, of course, there was this whole situation where these stories have been leaking out since December. And over again, Boris Johnson has said, oh, I believed all the rules were followed. I believed it was implicitly a work event as regarding one of the parties that's been investigated by the Met. You know, I'm as disgusted as you that this was happening. So there's not just the fact of the parties happening, it's the fact that people feel like they've been lied to by the minister. And obviously he denies that he lied. He says that, I mean, if he did mislead Parliament, that would be a resigning issue. So I think there is this sense that there's one rule for them and one rule for everyone else, and people are really annoyed about that. But this is also coming off the back of this cost of living issue. So we're having really, really high levels of inflation. In October, at the beginning of the pandemic, the Chancellor decided to increase the benefits, like the social welfare for new claimants by £20. And in October, they took that £20 uplift away. So lots and lots of people had their benefits cut. Benefits haven't risen with inflation, so that is effectively another cut. But even for people like me who are, you know, comfortably off, like not on benefits, you know, I'm seeing my energy bills go up. I'm seeing my food prices go up. And we have, again, this real sense of unfairness that the people at the top are very, very wealthy. You know, our Chancellor is a multimillionaire. His wife is richer than the Queen. Johnson is a wealthy man. He's from a very privileged background. And there's this sense like, how can you really understand what it's like to lose your £20 a week benefit when you're already struggling to like feed your kids, when you're having to choose between eating and heating? So I think the combination of Partygate and that feeling of one rule for them and one rule for us has been compounded by the cost of living crisis, where it's like, well, they're the haves and we're the have-nots. And the electorate who voted in the local councils, it wasn't every council in the UK. Where I live, we didn't have elections this year. We had them last year. I think people voted to say, yeah, we're not happy. We're not happy with what's been going on.
Oh my God. Hi-Fi often frames everything as a class war. Jim, something's on your mind.
Yeah, well, I was going to say class war, right? That's what this is, and I think it's also really interesting model that needs to be looked at, you know, everywhere and here, which is the message that got through, right? It was that message of the hypocrisy of class warfare, of feeling exactly as you said, that these people are imposing their will on us and not following the same rules.
Yeah.
And I think the whole trick to you know, getting some of this fascist insurgency out of our hair, right, and get back to being humans again, is to unmask them, exactly like this. To continually show that they don't actually believe the things that they are telling us to.
That is
the important thing as well with Partygate to remember is that Johnson was fined. Like, he had to pay a fine for breaking the COVID laws. And this is the first time a prime minister has had a sort of a criminal penalty put against him. Ever. And, you know, we know that, I'm sure there have been other prime ministers that have broken the laws, but none of them have actually had to pay the fine. And he didn't resign. I mean, this is mad, this uncharted territory. People used to resign because they accidentally misled the House, or you know, like, because
they have no shame.
Our guys won't resign for being a blatant Russian asset. So you know.
So we learned a bit of intel. I learned a bit of intel that I shared with the guys earlier. So in a Trump rally. Apparently, Dr. Oz was booed. Apparently, the reason he was booed, according to those who interviewed people who were present, is that they find him to be an elitist. The reason I feel like that's very good intel is that if we can start framing this class warfare, if we can start framing some of these guys who are pretending to have the moral high ground, whatever it is they're selling, as elitists, I think that would actually be something that could be weaponized against them. We are in a narrative war. They have the money. We have the truth on our side, but it's hard for the truth to crack through the propaganda. And it sounds to me like what's happening in UK is that some of this truth is actually penetrating the propaganda, and they are seeing an elitism that they do not like.
Hey, Heidi, real quick, I think part of that is the follow-up was that Dr. Oz voted in the Turkish elections, right? So he has Turkish citizenship, and I think that was breaking as well. So part of that, your elitism, you're so elite, you're not voting in the U.S. election, but you voted in the Turkish election. So there's the presentation of an image, and then in reality, right?
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about Erdogan, right? So, we know that Trump talked to Erdogan more than he talked to any other world leader. This guy is a human rights violator left and right. And so, again, when we talk about authoritarian capture and we talk about, some of what we are fighting, it's exactly people like Erdogan that we are fighting. So that's an excellent point, Connor.
Erdogan and Putin are basically the same. They're allies in this project.
Ties to organized crime.
And Oz is for sure a Turkish spy, in my opinion. But the reason, and this is important, that Oz is getting crap from the right is because they're trying to cover up for the other people who were taking Turkish money, Mike Flynn. For example, who got $530,000 to steal the 2016 election from Erdogan. So anyway, there's that. I just wanted to clear that up. Sorry.
So this is, now that we're talking about human rights violations, now that we're talking about authoritarians and the patriarchy and all the controls that authoritarians try to put on anyone they can, this is the most beautiful segue to the work that Sharn and I have been doing and pulling all-nighters doing. And quite frankly, we've been doing it for a year and a half now on Roe v. Wade. And I think it's very important that we do not allow all the headlines of shit and all the distractions to distract from this.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a dark day, very dark day.
Sharn, tell us.
I still think people haven't quite absorbed it yet, right?
I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right.
And I think part of the reason that it was leaked, and for me, I don't think it was leaked from the left. I think it was leaked from the right.
Absolutely.
And I think it was to because it was surprising. It came from nowhere, and it's getting people used to it, right? And suddenly it's going to be a great day if they do an excuse for rape, right? And that's how this propaganda works, and it terrifies me that it's currently being spun as a leak story. On Twitter, for example.
Even since Sharn and I have done that story, we've seen that the Louisiana quote unquote murder law has moved forward. So Sharn, tell our viewers, since you've been really embedded and entrenched in this work for years, really, what is the most important takeaway from this week? But also, it's very important that we are a show about disinformation. How much disinformation continues to infect these types of narratives? When you mentioned, even the term partial birth abortion is essentially propaganda, is essentially something that was created to stoke that moral outrage and moral panic. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, it's horrifying. It's really important that we don't lose sight of the fact that this isn't just a law change. This is the removal of women's fundamental human rights across the US, and the message that will send to other nations, and that women will die. I mean, in Poland, they tightened their abortion law in January 2021, so that abortion was banned in all cases. It was already banned in all cases, but there was an exception for rape and incest, threat to the mother's life, and fetal anomaly, and they got rid of the fetal anomaly as exception. And 3 women have died in Poland since that happened, having been refused life-saving abortion care. So women will die if Roe goes. There is no doubt in my mind. And what are they going to say? What are they going to do when that happens? How are they going to respond? It's horrifying to me. I mean, the Louisiana bill in itself wants to ban interventions in the cases of ectopic pregnancies. Like that, that's a life sentence for women. They will die. You don't recover from an ectopic pregnancy. So it's really important that we remember that when we talk about it, because I think it's very easy to kind of get into this is what's being said. These are the organizations involved, and actually this is a real fundamental rights issue and a life and death issue for many, many women. But yeah, in terms of disinformation, I mean, the anti-abortion right is the masters of disinformation. I think some of the tactics that we see in other anti-rights movements have kind of been learned through the anti-abortion movement. So speaking of partial birth abortion, this is not a thing that exists. But it is banned despite it not existing. And there was a really famous case. It's a famous case study because in a few years ago, a guy called, I'm going to say Richard Anarchis, who was giving a speech to the Leadership Institute, which is an organization that trains conservative activists, including Mike Pence. And as we all know, Mike Pence has been gunning for abortion his whole career.
Yes.
And he talked about how they started to introduce the term partial birth abortion to replace the terms like late-term abortion or, interventions that save the mother's life, which is what it is. And they said, because when you say partial birth, what it makes you think of is a baby and a baby being born and a child. And they said, we kept bringing it back, partial birth, until it became like the accepted term. And now that term is in legislation. There is a ban on partial birth abortion in the US law. And I think what I always found quite interesting about that is we've seen the same thing with kind of the response to critical race theory.
Exactly.
So,
I was thinking the same thing,
a sort of
CRT.
And I can't remember which sort of actor it was who said, we keep saying critical race theory until it becomes this term that everybody thinks is like
Rufo.
being Rufo, that was it. So you can see the same tactics across these disinformation movements.
That's very, very important that you brought that up, because I think it's very important that people do not get hung up, with one thread at a time, that they actually look at this as part of a major movement and what we're calling tyranny of the minority right now. And this is, happening state by state by state as they become these laboratories of authoritarianism. But what really concerns me when I listen to you right now is that I had a friend who lived in Saudi Arabia in the 70s. And she was able to drive herself. She was able to move around, and maybe because she was American, it was a little bit looser. But she said that she has watched, over the decades, it get, more and more and more and more egregious, more and more control. And so for me to even be having this conversation with a 57-year-old woman in, America, where I grew up in San Francisco in the 70s, where it was cool if you were gay. It was cool if you were interracially married. It was cool, if you were a feminist. All this stuff was cool. And so to see this rollback occurring in 2022, I don't know what it's going to take for people to wake up. It's like this is this is ground zero, like right now. Like we got to do something like now. Well,
I think this is why I was glad that we wrote that piece last week, which was the one that was up on the screen before, the long backlash against abortion rights, because this has been happening since 1973. Since Roe was introduced, there has been this movement to remove it. But that hasn't come purely from a kind of anti-abortion perspective. That has come from an anti-rights perspective, an anti-woman perspective.
Yeah.
So if you think about the 1960s and the 70s as this kind of burgeoning movement of women's rights, women gaining more economic independence, women moving from the domestic to the public sphere, you know, this was a kind of moment of women's liberation. And there hasn't, even though there have been historic moments in the West of women gaining more rights, such as the vote, nothing was as seismic a shock as the 1960s, 1970s liberation movements. And so much of that was fueled by reproductive rights, by access to contraception and by access to abortion. And I mean, one of the things that I find when I've been researching the far right, and particularly the kind of very old school far right, there's always this sense that women going into public space, women moving out of the domestic to the public, has kind of degenerated society. You know, these silly women who, you know, mess everything up. Like, they're voting for progressive politics, they're pro-LGBT rights, they're pro-civil rights. I mean, this is, you know, gross generalizations in themselves. Yeah, right. Lots of women are not progressive. Lots of women do not believe in these things. But generally, women are more likely to support socially just causes. And so you've long had this backlash of women's liberation and women's freedom, and women taking up public space. That has been a real focal point of the sort of religious right, the Christian right, and the far right themselves. And I think, you know, again, we've seen real moves in the last few years. You know, feminism has become much more prominent. We had Me Too. We've had a lot of kind of discussion about women's rights. And this backlash, this desire to put women back in our boxes and to remove the rights that give us the freedoms to have jobs, to have economic security. We saw it in Nazi Germany, you know, the Weimar period in Germany, women had a more liberation, you know, women were kind of coming out and kind of, you know, everything from shorter skirts and cigarettes to getting the vote and having more economic independence. We saw it in fascist Italy. There was a backlash against reproductive rights and kind of reproductive freedoms, and a desire to kind of do nation building and birth programs and incentivizing women to go home and have more children. Because again, we were seeing these kind of suffrage movements. So there's always been these patterns in history of, as soon as women get a little bit, these kind of far right natalist nationalist movements clamp back down.
That's right.
And so I think we really need to think about it in terms of living through a backlash, and it's a backlash that is being fueled by male supremacy. And the important thing to remember as well is, like, a lot of the sort of far right anti-gender movements that I track are not only against abortion, they're against things like protections for domestic abuse victims.
Yeah.
You know, they want to get rid of the laws that protect against domestic abuse. So, for example, Vox, the far-right party in Spain, wants to get rid of domestic abuse laws. What Trump did to the domestic abuse laws when he was in power was very, very concerning. And that goes hand in hand with the anti-abortion moves and the anti-abortion efforts, because they're saying that women shouldn't have security. Women should just be under patriarchal authority in the home, and that the home is the unit and there shouldn't be any state interference. And so women are, you know, it's just always rolling back. And so it's really, we shouldn't see it in silos. And then of course you've got the white supremacist angle as well, which is
exactly. Well, this is what I wanted to go next. I want Jim to take us in, or Sean to take us in next, because last time you were here you said one of our big mistakes was not taking Gamergate more seriously, and we didn't talk as much about the misogyny that grew out of all of that. So maybe one of you guys can take us into that.
Well, I was just going to say, you know, and you sort of put a fine edge on your point about, you know, racism, right? There is no overcoming or coming to terms with racism without equality between the sexes and the genders. You know, there's almost a sense in which that has to occur at a bedrock level first before, you know, race relations can occur. And I know that there's been plenty of studies on economic development for second, third world countries, and the quickest way for them to become more first world countries or capable of producing more is civil rights for women. Yeah. So the fastest way for those economies to grow, but not only a population pool, but in general, the entire country rises when there's more equality between the sexes.
Misogyny is the root of white supremacy. I mean, and you can see that from the etymology of the word red pill, of the phrase red pill. Red pill started as a Reddit forum that was an incel forum that was pure misogyny. It was just about hating women. And over the last decade, it has metastasized to mean brainwash people into white supremacy. That's,
Yeah.
you know, that you can use it as a verb, you can use it as a noun. And I think that, you know, over the last decade, this backlash of misogyny has been building. And yeah, we didn't pay attention to Gamergate. We let it metastasize into the alt-right, and it didn't go anywhere.
Yeah,
And Sean, you've
absolutely.
done a lot of
Red pill was
undercover
very,
work, right? You've done a lot of undercover work in that world that probably gave you some really good insight.
yeah. So, I mean, the red pill did initially start out as misogyny. I mean, it was about men trying to graduate from beta status to alpha status through gaming women, and
Yep.
trying to get as many women as you can to have sex with you, even if that sex was non-consensual. And then, you know, I think Aya Romano in Vox magazine called it, you know, white male, you know, misogyny is the gateway drug to white supremacy, because it always feeds on the same sense of grievance, this sense that, you know, I don't have something that I am entitled to, whether that's
right.
women's bodies or whether that's, you know, being the masters of the universe. And they saw Trump as this, the Red Pill Forum in particular, saw Trump as this kind of the ultimate alpha male. You know, he was going to win the war on men that Hillary Clinton was apparently waging against men. I mean, where is this war? I mean, they seem to be doing fine. And it was always, you know, and then of course with Trump came the white supremacy. So I think it's, you know, if you can't divorce the two. And yeah, I've spent a lot of time on incel forums and red pill forums, and particularly looking at how they talk about abortion. And again, it comes back to this idea of the degeneracy, you know, that women having access to public space, women being politically active, women moving out of the domestic sphere is causing the degeneracy of Western society. And of course, you know, some of the more disturbing stuff on the incel websites is that they want to get rid of abortion because they want women to die. I mean, that's it. There was a post that I will never forget where it said, I don't care if women die of unsafe abortions because women shouldn't have rights anyway.
Well,
Yeah,
I think
that's what they really think, and that degeneracy term is also shared by Nazis, by the straight Nazis. They say exactly the same thing, and there's a reason for that, because they share a lot of the same ideology, right?
Yeah,
so.
absolutely.
This is the perfect, speaking of Nazis and misogynists and truly awful people, this is the perfect segue to a story that you broke yesterday, I believe. Very important story about an InfoWars character saying some truly horrible things. Sean, do we have that audio? And
we do. And just
Sean, do you want to do an intro?
Warning.
a quick content warning. But yes, we have the audio. It does contain, you know, epithets and slurs and quite a bit of coarse language. So.
And the reason we decided not to blur it is because we think it's really freaking important. Now, Sharon, can you give us an intro into why this is important and who this person is and his relationship to even Trump, say?
Yeah, so this was a story that was published by the Byline Times team yesterday, so Friday, the 6th of May. And it's about a character from the UK called Paul Joseph Watson, who is an alt-right or alt-light YouTuber. He's got 1.9 million subscribers on YouTube. He's got 1.2 million followers on Twitter. He was banned from Facebook in 2019 because he was part of InfoWars. And at the time, Facebook was targeting the people involved in InfoWars in one of their, you know, occasional decisions to do something about conspiracy theory. Yeah.
Right.
And actually, Trump tweeted sort of in his defense at that point when they were banned from Facebook. But what's interesting about this, the reason we ran this report is because Watson has always kind of skirted along the sort of lines of the mainstream. You know, he's made videos that I find offensive, but I'm supposed to find them offensive. And, you know, he talks about migration in very offensive terms. He talks about feminism and movements like Black Lives Matter in very offensive terms, but it's always done with this kind of irony, you know, for the lulz. It's like I'm you know, winding up the SJWs. I have to say I'm shocked that you can't say this anymore. It was always done with that kind of that sort of edginess, but never saying anything that was too far, too close to the bone. And in doing so, he was able to kind of get this big following and also to kind of become closer to sort of mainstream right-wing figures. And so when were given this audio at Byline Times, we were like, well, you know, this proves that it's not for the lols. It's, you know, the sort of things where you're like, oh, I don't think that's quite okay. That is quite, you know, anti-migrant. That is quite inappropriate. He actually does hold these really racist, anti-Semitic, or he's willing to say very racist and anti-Semitic things when he thinks that he's in a safe space. And that's why we released a recording, and that's why we did the report.
Well,
has he lost his YouTube? Has he lost his Twitter?
Not so far, no.
Maybe that'll be the call to action after people hear it. Sean, do you want to roll it?
I should also say as well that before we ran the report, we went to him and his lawyers for comment repeatedly, and we never heard back. So we did all our due diligence before running this.
Okay. All right, here we go.
All right, guys, let's take a look.
Content warning.
CW.
There's another one.
Thank you.
Fucking hate
nigger faggot activists who get in my way in London and stick signs up in my face trying to get me to join the gay faggot Palestinian cause. I don't give a shit about Israel or Palestine. I care about white people and not sand nigger packy Jew faggot coons. Yeah? I'll leave you with that. I really think that you should press the button to wipe Jews off the face of the earth. That's what
Shit.
So yeah, I mean, it's shocking stuff. And as I say, I think it was important to report it because of his the way he presents himself as being kind of outright.
I think you're right. It's
mainstream right.
It's a very Tucker Carlson-esque sort of tone initially, and then, you know, imagine if we had this audio from Tucker Carlson, right? That would
I hope we do someday. I was thinking about how Nick Fuentes has been cranking up the volume publicly on the things that he says, so that he's dipping his toe in the water of making it more and more and more egregious. Jim, you know, you've been talking about this flame going up, and we're seeing a lot of things that we never would have even imagined a few years ago. What do you think this represents?
I just think it's you know, somebody got caught saying the stuff that they believe, right?
Yeah.
Listen, you can't really dip your toe in Nazism, you know. You can like Tucker Carlson, you can kind of bob and weave and this and that, but at the end of the day, he's talking about great replacement theory, which is neo-Nazi ideology, right? Tucker's the same as this guy. He feels the same way about the same people. And I think it's brilliant that you found it, that you got it, and that you're putting it out there. Because somebody with that sort of reach, you know, millions and millions of people following him, he has no business with that audience, or at a minimum without them knowing who he really is. So thank you for that.
And I think being a show about disinformation and having everything being incorrectly framed around free speech, Hi-Fi, when you hear that, what goes through your head?
Right, or Paul
This is not free
Watson wants to eliminate Jews, right? Like that.
I have Jewish people in my family. I have Muslims in my family. I have Buddhists in my family.
I'm half Jewish. Yeah.
Well,
so
you know,
there's no. I don't have any words for it other than, you know.
I can tell you this:
he's a Nazi. He's a Nazi, and Nazis should not be allowed in civilization.
it brings out that rage. And again, I'm German. I grew up being called a Nazi. I'm not a Nazi. I'm somebody who wants the world to be the best it can possibly be. And you know, I listened to that guy, and one thing I thought is like, oh, is he drunk when he's doing this? What's going on? No, I'm sure this is just exactly what Jim said, how he feels. And I understand Hi-Fi's rage. You know, he's not only Irish, he's also Scottish. And so he has that.
I'm not even mad at the UK, Sharon. I'm just, you know, it is what it is.
Well, anyway, I think it's really important that we started on something positive, and I'd like to end on something positive. I think we are seeing these guys being exposed. I think we are seeing that perhaps, as Dr. Charles Creel said today in a podcast that he and Kat are doing, Kat and Charles Saved the World. I was lucky enough to be the guest speaker. He thinks that these guys may have overshot their boundaries.
Yeah.
And maybe they're going a bit too far. Maybe
Yeah.
this turning up the heat all the time on the hatred and the venom and the anti and the control and misogyny and maybe they're overshooting their boundaries. And I hope so. I hope what happened in the UK.
I hope it influences the US.
It is. I think, you know, the Conservatives in the UK have been so desperate to fight a culture war. I mean, it's embarrassing, their desperation over it. And most
Same thing
people,
here, yeah.
it's just not working because people can't buy food to feed their kids. So they don't, you know, it's like, that's the thing that frustrates people. And I think it'll be interesting to see with this loss which direction they take. I think most of the analysts are being like, just drop the culture war. This is not serving you. But whether they'll instead turn to ramp it up, because, you know, we also know that when people are struggling, that divide and rule strategy of finding scapegoats to blame can be very successful for political parties, and it has worked for them in the past. But yes, it feels like it sort of is hanging in the balance right now, and it'll be interesting to see which way they go. But it does feel like in some cases there has been this overshooting, and it's not.
How do we educate people? How do we educate people that what the conservatives doing is bullshit, and they're pushing buttons, and they want this culture war, and it's the stupidest thing I've ever seen, because in war people end up dead. Nobody wants war.
Right.
How do we teach them this?
I don't know, with good information, I guess. You can put information with the better information, and I think hopefully that's kind of what we're doing at Byline Times, and other good journalists in the community is just constantly trying to expose. I mean, you know, it's thanks to amazing journalists like Pippa Creer at the Daily Mirror that we knew about Partygate. You know, that was the work of investigative journalism and getting information out there to the public so they can make their own minds up about the leadership. So yeah, where we're kind of being flooded with disinformation, there's really good people who are like, no, this is the truth.
Yeah.
And and that's the only way you can educate people, is by saying, well, here is the truth.
That's right.
But-
My solution is everybody needs to subscribe to the Byline Times. They need to subscribe to Byline Times.
There you go.
Get good reader-funded information during a disinformation war. You know, this is the time to fight back with truth. Sharon, that was so incredible. Anybody have any final thoughts before we let
Oh
you
yeah,
go?
I was just going to say,
midnight
of course,
in
Hi-Fi has one.
Sean, you go first.
What's the famous Mark Twain quote, is that it's easier to scam someone than it is to convince them that they've been lied to about a scam.
Yeah, that's right.
You know,
that's not exactly it. By the way, Sharon and I are looking forward to not talking about fascism all the time. We're going to do a book club at some point. So if you guys want in, let us know. You can be inaugural members of our book club. We just figured we should have a break. You know, I asked her what she's reading, and she's like, "Oh, I'm reading a book about, you know, the history of which one is it? You know, Soviet Union.
Secondhand Time by Svetlana Alexievich, about the breakup of the Soviet Union.
So she's reading the breakup of the Soviet Union. I'm reading, like, you know, Children of Nazis and another Chernobyl bio. It's like at some point we need a break from this stuff.
I'm basically just reading Telegram, so you know.
A nice novel, novel to read.
Yes, I have one final thought, and it's more of a request than anything else. Could we please get the English press to start referring to Johnson as Bojo the Clown? I would love to see that in print, just once. Bojo the Clown. That's all I want. All right.
I mean, I think the Daily Star does on occasion. So if you look at the Daily Star front pages, you might find it.
I have to correct my horrible quote there. It's actually it's easier to fool people. It's easier to fool people than it is to convince them that they've been fooled.
We knew that. It was just a.
It was close. It was close. Scam.
I used scam. Yeah, anyway.
Yeah, it's all
But
right.
maybe we have to fool. Maybe we have to fool some people. If we
Before
don't
we let
paraphrase
you go, like, I don't want to refer to these guys as clowns anymore. I think they're all so dangerous. I think they're all such Russian
killer
pets, and I am done with the clowning. I want them all to be shot into space. Just shoot them into space.
Shoot him into space is fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Elon
they're
Musk
gonna have to.
is going to be captain.
Yeah, they're gonna use the rockets.
They're gonna go to Mars, and that's where they belong. They
Shoot
should go
them
there
all
right now.
into space.
Well,
That's
thank
We're
you,
gonna
guys.
hack their rocket, and instead of going to Mars, we're going to send them to the sun.
Or a
Yeah.
rocket to Russia, one way or the other. Thank you so much, Sharn, for being
Thanks, Sharn.
with us. You rule.
We
Thank you for
appreciate
staying
you.
up late. Get some sleep, and I'm sure
Thanks
we'll
so
be back
much.
at it next week.
Definitely. See you all soon. Take
you.
care.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey,
How much
that's
do we
great.
love her? So we learned a few things. Tech bros have issues, and I think that's going to be very good. We learned that people, not even the right, likes elitists when push comes to shove. And I just want to thank everybody so much for joining us. I've been taking notes this whole hour. I cannot wait till Radpod and Chill, and we look so forward to seeing you right back here on Thursday.
And happy Mother's Day. Wait, that already right.
Okay. That's okay. It could still be.
All right.
It could still be Happy Mother's Day to the moms.
We hope
right.
you had a happy Mother's Day.
We hope you had a very happy
There you
Mother's
go.
Day.
There you
In
go.
the other room is my son, and it's really exciting to have him here spending the weekend with me. So I'm very pleased.
That's
And my
awesome. See you
daughter
guys.
just won a major poetry award. I just got the message here, so it's happy Mother's Day
Happy
to
Mom.
me. And thank
See
you
ya.
to all your beautiful mothers, because they produce men with empathy. And I know part of why Jim is such a feminist is that single mother of his who raised him right. So well done to your moms.
I guess.